Hello and welcome to the latest Royal Blue podcast as we look back on another Everton victory on the road, another Everton victory in London as well. Delighted to be joined by two of our Everton reporters who are obviously there at Selhurst Park for us on Saturday. Joe Thomas and Chris Beesley. Gav Buckland is also with us today. I know he weren't watching the game, but no doubt he was biting his fingernails like myself back on Merseyside on Saturday before we get stuck into what was a brilliant win and some brilliant scenes after the final whistle. Chris, just want to start off the pod with you and talk about something that happened on the train back from London.
Yeah, a little interaction, a bit of a Joe Thomas fan club it was. I think, the long we had all Evertonians going down there. The train hijinks and our final train back to Liverpool being cancelled and then reinstated, and we were on there. And it was just before we were pulling into the Lime Street. And Joe been up and down the carriage. He was very hot on there, and he'd gone to get some of the complimentary water. He'd gone missing for a while, but he'd come back. And some fella said to his mate, he goes, "I told you that's Joe Thomas there from the Royal Blue podcast." He goes, "That's him." We go, "Oh, I love it, Joe. Big fans of the show. You're great, blah, blah, blah." So Joe's like one step away from signing a few autographs or doing a selfie or something like that. And then his mate turns to us. He goes, "Joe, when you see that Chris Beesley," he says, "tell him to stop writing lowest points total in Everton's history." So what it is, and I said to him at the time, I said in my defence, and I'll keep doing it. I think I threw one in yesterday. Well, I know I did. I do it for a reason. I actually put the lowest equivalent points total, as Gav will know, obviously with a switch from 2 to 3 points. And I do it to call the club out because 135 years of Football League and Premier League football, in terms of performance on the pitch, that was Everton's worst season ever in terms of their performance, including the 2 times they've been down, 1930 and 1951. And we can't lose track of that. We can't let them off the hook for that in my book. I mean, that was awful. That Evertonians like that, our friend there, and it was Tony the Blue, so shout out for him. He says, "Oh, it kills me, Chris." He goes, "It kills me every time you write that." I don't do it to upset Evertonians. I do it because I think there's a duty there that we need to remember just how bad that was. And for people like Tony, travelling the length and breadth of the country, spending their hard-earned cash, going down to Crystal Palace here, there and everywhere, I think that the club needs to be called out on that. But I also said, onwards and upwards. And also, like I said, the third consecutive victory in London. So hopefully there are better times ahead for Tony and all other Blues.
Definitely. Well, shout out for Tony. Thanks for listening.
And just to make that clear, Tony, thank you for listening. I didn't think you were going to get a bollocking. We really appreciate it. To everybody listening.
Joe, I'm going to have to cut that one out.
And Joe, do remember us when you go even more famous. But no doubt, Tony on the train, the other Blues on the train would have enjoyed reading your match verdict. I was lucky enough to be the one processing, uploading to the website. I thought it captured the mood really, really well. And I know Hugh and Chris and the other Evertonians didn't have the best of times in terms of the trains on Saturday, but you must have really enjoyed doing that, both of you. You must have enjoyed watching those scenes and watching the performance in the win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the train situation made it very difficult for everybody that was using that mode of transport to get to and from Selhurst Park. Probably about as far as you can do on the trains in a day for the London fixtures, and still make it back on time, providing the rail situation is okay. But just before we got on the train, amidst all the chaos and the confusion on the platforms, I remember being in Euston and just hearing Evan Van singing, and it just being nice. And you just think, I've been doing this job for a year and a half now, obviously, Chris much longer, and the amount of away days, just desolate away days where you're embarking on long journeys back either in the car or on public transport, just sat there thinking, that's another away end that's sold out amidst a cost of living crisis, and they've been treated to that dross. And you just fell for them. Obviously hard for us, but they're the ones doing the hard work and paying the real money to go down there and do that. And it just all of a sudden it just feels a complete world away. That's 3 consecutive wins in London, and it's a testament to what Sean Dyche is doing. And I know that we spent a lot of time over the course of this season so far trying to work out whether progress is being made and the fragility and the sustainability of the progress. And I think that what we saw on Saturday was more tangible evidence that real progress is being made. And of course, it's tentative. Of course, we can't get ahead of ourselves. We know that things can go. We've seen in the last few years that things can very quickly go wrong. And I think there's also probably a justified, legitimate sense among the Everton support base and probably from within the club that even when things are going right within the club, somebody from out externally will try and put a pole between the spokes. And we know that we've got takeover. We know that we've got the financial fair play hearing and things like that. So there are plenty of other opportunities for people to try and stymie the momentum. But it's very clear, I think, and I think this result, perhaps the result more than the performance, because I don't think it was actually Everton's best performance in the last few weeks. But that in itself is testament to the progress being made, because all of a sudden there's a side that doesn't have to have everything go right on the pitch to come away with 3 points, but it's real evidence of progress being made, and I think that's something that we can all enjoy and savour over the coming fortnight.
Yeah, for a long time, I think most Blues didn't expect to get anything on our travels, but as Joe said in his ratings, said there, I think we've won in West London, East London, South London, so Tottenham and Arsenal, watch out later this season. But I know, there's things, as we mentioned on this podcast so many times, that there's obviously things going on in the background against the backdrop. But it's right to enjoy this, isn't it? Because this isn't been usual in recent years, going away and winning from home with such regularity. And do you understand that kind of scenes of joy that you're seeing in the dugouts, on the pitch after the game, in the stands?
I think I didn't understand scenes of joy after any victory, to be honest with you, home or away, really. And that goes for any club, but especially for Everton, as Joe said, because of all the bad stuff on and off the pitch over the last couple of years. And I think, it's fully justifiable. And I do get what Joe's saying, is that, I mean, I didn't see the game, but I've only read reports and I'm seeing the highlights. It's a testimony to the character of the team that we managed to drag out a victory without really individually and as a team playing, as well as perhaps they have done on a few other occasions this season. And I think that supporters always look at that as well. I think they know when a team's been under the caution and has eked out a win. And you can't beat a late winner, can you, at the end of the day? I mean, I think celebrations are always great at the end when there's been a late winner. And also as well, the testimony to the character for the fact that Palace at home came back twice as well. So it all makes a difference, doesn't it? And I think we had that, was it 2 or 3 wins in 30 odd away matches, and we've had like three on the spin or whatever. And that's just that's great stuff. And I don't think we'll be getting our lowest equivalent points total, I think, this season, hopefully. I think we've got enough. What have we got now? Is it 14? Yeah, 14 from whatever. You would hope that there's a lot more in the bank from where that's come from.
Chris, and one of the pieces you did on the Echo's website yesterday, you referenced a certain previous trip to Selhurst Park, an FA Cup tie, and after the game, Frank Lampard turned the air blue a little bit.
A bit like Joe, wasn't he?
Yeah. he accused him of Everton of lacking something. That certainly, you look at across the course of this season, after a summer that's given Sean Dyche a real chance to work with this squad. Yeah. Looking back, apart from the Aston Villa game, where it did feel like everything that could go wrong did go wrong, and even as bad as we were that day, you look, Villa more or less scored every shot they had on target.
Yeah.
There's not been a collapse, has there? Which, in recent years has been an all too regular occurrence. And there were times, I think it's fair to say, when Palace certainly got level at 2-2, that in the past you would have expected Palace to go on and win that game. But Everton do have that resilience now.
Yeah, definitely. Like the other panellists have said, that's a big part of the satisfaction for this, and for Sean Dyche as well as the Evertonians. He referenced that in his post-match press conference. Finding those different ways to win Premier League games, which he says, unless you're one of those elite, the moneyed elite, everyone's got to do that. You can't play in one certain way or be one-dimensional in that respect. You've got to. And he also talks about this idea of luck over a season, the fortune. It doesn't always work out like that, but in those moments earlier in the season, where Everton, particularly at home, had played very well, but then, what does Dyche say? Unfathomable. The fact that they didn't get anything from those first 3 home games when they were beaten, whereas he thinks that the fact that they can go to Palace, like you say, and being pegged back twice, and Palace, I mean, I said that in my piece or whatever you think, do a few strange things at Crystal Palace, but in fair play to them, as a club, I think they've got the best set of fans in London. Personally, I think in terms of the way they get behind the team, and you pull back again the mistake by James Tarkowski, who'd been magnificent otherwise, but that one breakdown in communications, that was all set up for Palace to go on and win that. So the fact that Everton were able to weather the storm and then go on and get the winner themselves, it's testament to the progress. I think genuine progress being made under Sean Dyche in what is still a relatively short space of time. And I also did that in that same piece. I was saying that the owners as well as the fans need to take that on board, because too often we obviously Bournemouth got a great result at the weekend against Newcastle United, and we saw the Newcastle players sort of having exchanges with their fans, as similar as Joe pointed out to me that we'd seen with Everton at the Vitality Stadium last year. But in terms of appointments and the fact that Bournemouth made that controversial change when their American owner got rid of Gary O'Neill in the summer, who also had actually a great result, didn't he, against Tottenham at the weekend. But yeah, you got to be careful here. That I think that Everton are onto a winner with Sean Dyche, and after 8 managers in 7 years, I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, and he said himself he's a Marmite manager and that he divides opinion, but I think he's just the right fit for Everton right now.
Joe, did Sean Dyche, he doesn't give much away, does he, in press conference? I think it's fair to say, but he was quite expansive in his praise, of some plays in particular. He doesn't usually pick out praise, but he certainly did with the match winner, who we'll come on to. Just a guy picked up a pie in the post-match press conference to celebrate on the home way. Was he any different after that one? Did it look like he enjoyed it even more, given the fact that it was a late winner, given the fact we're going into the international break in such good form?
It's quite interesting because where we are in the press box in Selhurst Park, you don't have the best view. The back of the set is very much a letterbox view in an old school stadium. We had a pillar right in front of me, but one thing that we do get at some grounds is we get a monitor which is showing you live footage of the camera footage. And one of the things that I found quite interesting was 5 minutes ago, after Everton obviously had the lead, the camera picked up Sean Dyche, and I don't know if this was shown, probably wasn't shown on Match of the Day or anything else like that, but he was in the dugout and he actually looked nervous, like he actually looked a little bit apprehensive, and it was the first time I'd really seen him look like that in an Everton dugout. And I think that probably gives us a sense of, he probably realised that he was on the cusp of taking a bigger leap forward than perhaps just as the result in isolation would look. It was a result that had real meaning to it and depth to it because of what has gone on before it. We spoke last week a lot about the wider context and how, given the recent form and the points that have been picked up and the manner in which they've been accumulated, you could probably say that even a defeat, as long as it wasn't an embarrassing defeat at Crystal Palace, still wouldn't have undermined claims of progress there. To have gone there and to have actually got a win, kind of almost, it just takes that evidence of there being a real step forward even further. And I think that he almost kind of had a sense of the magnitude of what that victory would be, because obviously, and you see it in everything. You see it in the country's perception of Everton when you look at Match of the Day and you listen to other podcasts, things like that. The way in the change in which people are now talking about Everton compared to how they were, say, 4 weeks ago, just after Luton, when it was a very, very different narrative. And although Sean Dyche was saying everything that he was saying then and has continued to say, and so the results will eventually come because the performances have always been there, and I think that he can feel vindicated in that. And you're right, he doesn't give a huge amount away in press conferences. It can be difficult. Obviously, you're trying to get an understanding of what's going on, and the reality is he doesn't really tell you anything about what's going on in the dressing room. And he quite often finds he's innovative in finding new ways to deflect, and someone in my job that can be very difficult and very frustrating. But obviously also I have to acknowledge that it's completely understandable, because you want to, if you're in Dyche's position, particularly if you're in the position Chris has already alluded to, where you're at a club where, if we're being perfectly honest, things have been chaotic over a sustained period of time, and the pressure has been immense on that dressing room, and they have been dealing with circumstances that many of which are outside their control. You can understand why you'd want to protect the secrets and the sanctity of what goes on there. So, I fully understand that, and obviously that's a battle that we have to play out every week. It can often be a little bit awkward, but I think there was a bit of a change in him. The second time I think I've noticed it this season, because I thought there was a change in him during the international break, the first one. So from after the defeat to after the draw to Sheffield United, then coming back a fortnight later and playing Arsenal, where I think the events at the start of the season, and then when you added on the final day of the transfer window and losing Alex Iwobi in particular, and then you had the whole fracas over Damari Gray and the would he stay, wouldn't he stay, where it looked like the club had word on the basis they could reintegrate into the side, but then given his comments and what happened, they eventually were in a position where they probably had to sell him to Saudi Arabia. It felt like at that point, with the results the way they had gone, for the first time he was almost starting to kind of be a little bit unsteady, or realise that, I perhaps need to take more people with me on this journey. And then I think this is probably the second change I noticed in him, where he's probably had his own beliefs vindicated a little bit, and as a result of that, I'm not sure. I don't think we'll see him open up anymore, but he might kind of provide a little bit more. He might be a little bit more magnanimous in who he's praising, and it might be go away from the generic to the bit more particular, because he knows that if he picks out certain players, he's operating from a base where everyone who knows that they're not getting mentioned, well, the results and performances are there. So then, they know there's a base level of 7 out of 10, and he's picking out the 8 and 9s. Whereas if he was doing it 6 weeks ago and picking out individuals, given the results, it might be that everyone didn't get mentioned. We're thinking, well, I'm a 4 or 5 out of 10, and these are the 7s. So that shows how far Everton have come.
Definitely. Gav, what have you made of Sean Dyche as manager for Everton?
How long have you got? Yeah. I think first of all, we've got to acknowledge he's been managing in extraordinarily difficult circumstances, both on and off the pitch. So we don't want to talk about all the stuff off the pitch that's been done ad infinitum. On the pitch, I think he's had the difficulties as a consequence of that, because there's been no money spent. Well, not only no money spent, he's had to shed players, hasn't he? You've just spoken about players like Damari Gray and Iwobi, who's gone. Jordan this season, I suppose. So I think when you're judging his performances, you've got to bear that in mind. That he's coming into a club who's had, saying 8 managers or whatever it is in 7 years. So he's entered the club in a state of flux, a state of crisis, really, you would say. Morale was low, and the pressure was on to remain in the Premier League, which for Everton was probably more important than anybody else, because of the stadium for a start, and also the financial well-being of the club. And so I suppose that's what you've got to say first of all. When you judge his performance, you've got to say that. And although I felt that I think he did okay last year, got us over the line just about, I wasn't totally convinced that what I saw last season, you could say, yeah, we can take that into next season and we'll be okay. And especially knowing the fact that actually we weren't going to strengthen during the summer. So that was what I'd say about last season. About this season, I think I can only say what a lot of people have said, that early games probably a little bit unlucky not to get more points than what we did, but we still lost, didn't we? We still had no wins in the first 5 or 6 games, and at a time when, the bottom 3 didn't look great, we're still down there. But what he's shown, I think, is he's kept to his beliefs on how he wants to play the game, and he's drilled the players. He's drilled the players to do that, and that's finally bearing fruit. I think he was speaking about. I didn't hear the full beIN Sports interview, but that thing about understanding how he wants to play, and how Dele Alli understood how he wants to play. You get the players like that now, and what he's got now is a first 11 who know their roles. We've got good partnerships on the pitch, which is always important, and they know exactly what they've got to do, and that's testimony, I think, to the manager, and the coaching staff. And though you be judging him over 10 months or whatever he's been there now, I think in truth, you probably the best point to judge him is the last 9 games, isn't it, really? where he's finally had the settled team, and it helps when you've got players like Branthwaite who's come in, who's looked good, that he's, and Arna's looked good, he's had DCL back to fitness, which Dyche should take a lot of credit within that. And he's getting the results, and it's a team that we don't look like conceding a lot of goals, although we did concede two. That was a penalty on Saturday, but we've defensively been pretty sound, and we've got an attacking threat, especially away from home. We've scored shed loads of goals from the Dyche, haven't we? I mean, I'll have to do this, but I think if goals per away game by Everton manager, Dyche should be right up the top, because, I mean, he scored it, which you would never expect. So I'd say, in terms of marking him, I'd have to give him 7 on 10, but maybe more 8 on 10 the last 9 games and 6 on 10 beforehand. But our problem is going to be, as we've spoken about on the pod many times, is, as I said, a good first 11 that he's content with. Once we get below that, that's when the issues start, doesn't it? And that might become a problem for us before Christmas, because of the amount of games. And we're still in the Carabao Cup as well, which is credit to him for that.
As Gav said there, Chris, competition for places beyond probably 12, 13, 14 players at best. It's still pretty small Premier League squad and top quality compared to other teams. But I suppose one person who maybe not being in the team, it's bringing the best out of him, was the match winner on Saturday. Just a guy. I know you were surprised. I think your initial paragraph and your initial analysis, where did that come from? And I think we were all very much the same. But I thought he was excellent against Brighton when he came in just the week before, and probably slightly unfortunate to lose his place. But he responded brilliantly, and as you say, I've never known Dyche, probably in his Everton or his Burnley time, to give out the plaudits as much as he did for one player. But he deserved it, didn't he? I thought he did really well when he came on, and his goal was magnificent.
Yeah, well, we all know what Idrissa Gueye is supposedly good at, and he's very good at the things that he is good at, and he's providing that shield in front of the back four, fighting those fires there, and sort of building from there. What he's not known for is either necessarily his distribution or his finishing, and especially second time around when he's older. He's 34 years of age now. But in between all of that, his 2 spells at Everton, of course, he had the time at Paris Saint-Germain. And it was almost like he channeled Lionel Messi, Neymar and Mbappe into one for that one, especially with the left foot finish. I don't know if I'd ever imagine a time when I'd see like Idrissa Gueye finish like that on his left. Or, come to think of it, Vitaly Mykolenko having to go on his right, or even a header, the way that he finished that early goal with. But yeah, it just shows he has got that in his locker, and that's what we're saying. Don't be so predictable. And Dyche keeps saying he can see it in moments with these players just how good they are, and maybe we are seeing that, something that maybe for a long time was confined to low pressure environment at Finch Farm when they're just training. And we're actually seeing it, as we're saying, that phrase that was said before, bearing fruit in matches. Now, the fact that he's got the confidence to match the ability, and play that 1-2 with Decore, who again, as Dyche says, was Johnny on the spot for the second goal. How many goals has he got, certainly, since Sean Dyche came in? And it was incredible, again, with the attitude, because, I mean, maybe we could have sulked him. I mean, there he is, as a senior player, he came back in, and then after one game, and Arna comes back and he's back on the bench. But rather than that, he's gone out there and shown his manager and shown us all what he's capable of. And even if it was something we didn't realise before that he was capable of. So yeah, hats off to him. And then I'll see in a couple of weeks when we're back in action, there's another decision for the managers to make. But yeah, there is concern that beyond that initial pool of players, certainly if the games come thick and fast in December, I suppose that'd be the acid test in terms of what we got in terms of strength or depth for Sean Dyche.
Joe, one of my favourite moments after the match when I got to watch the highlights was when just a guy who was getting pushed towards the away end, wasn't he, by Anana and Danjuma. Really nice moment. He was almost like a reluctant hero, wasn't he? But I thought it spoke volumes about, obviously, the team spirits there. And can't help but kind of the parallels from a year ago going into what was a prolonged November international break, because obviously the World Cup on the back of those 2 defeats at Bournemouth, and not the nicest scenes, was there, between the players and the away end. Certainly after that second game, it does feel like we've come a fair distance in that year. There's been ups and downs along the way, but it does it feel a bit of a different club on the field, at least?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I still think that I still think that people are overly critical as to where Everton were this time a year ago, with the benefit of hindsight, because I think that as bad as that, and it really was a terrible week when they were awful against Leicester on Bonfire Night, and they had those two appalling performances in Bournemouth. It was very, very bad. But I do think that it's easy to forget that going into that Bonfire evening game against Leicester, Everton were actually on a reasonably decent run of form. And a win against Leicester would have taken them into the top half of the table. And that was a conversation that was taking place that week, that, Everton, they'd had that fantastic win against Crystal Palace, the 3-0 win, which was very much the high point, I think, of Lampard's tenure, in terms of it felt like they were on the cusp of progress. And then they'd gone and got a useful point at what was a dangerous Fulham side at that time, with Mitrovic and Willian firing. And they'd played all right at Craven Cottage, and we do these roundups every now and then, because I think that there are occasions when Everton have every right to feel aggrieved about refereeing decisions against them. And in that game, Mitrovic really should have got sent off for his tackle and Idrissa Gueye quite early in the first half. So I do think that at the time, this time last year, that there was something potentially there to build on, but it was probably a little bit more fragile. At that point, you probably had the Lampard, Tarkowski, Cody, that kind of dynamic. But it probably wasn't felt all the way through the team. And the resilience of that probably wasn't there either. It wasn't built on strong foundations. And we saw that by how quickly everything unravelled, including at that Bournemouth game. And, coming home on Saturday evening and look at those scenes at Bournemouth, it just, what is it about teams, trying to get on an upward trajectory, go into the Vitality Stadium in mid-November and having their dreams pulled apart. So, but this one, it does feel that the problem with Lampard was he had that big win against Palace and never really built on it. They had the draw at Fulham, and then it just went downhill from there. I wrote in a match report a couple of weeks ago how very similar the win over Bournemouth felt to that Crystal Palace moment, which was almost a year earlier. And I think the difference that we've seen here is that Everton have unequivocally built on a moment that could have been a one-off, but feels like an inflection point in the season now. And it really does feel that case, because you look at he had Bournemouth, and he had the international break, and you look at the way in which this side is built upon that. You go Liverpool, the only game they've lost is Liverpool away. And 0-0, 65 minutes in, half an hour with 10 men, Ibrahim Konate gets sent off. I think there's every chance Everton take at least a point from that game. All right, they might not have done. Liverpool are a very talented side, but they deserved the opportunity to fight that last 30 minutes on an even keel, and it was taken away from them. That could easily have led to a bit of a meltdown or something. It didn't. They went to West Ham, they won. They played Brighton, only conceded the win on that because of a very cruel, very unfortunate, very late goal. Then they've had this win as well. In between that, obviously, they've had the Carabao Cup victory as well, and they have a very good opportunity to get through to a semi-final of a major tournament where there's a 1 in 3 chance they will face non-Premier League opposition. So what they've done differently compared to last season is they've built on that, and I think that probably suggests that the foundations that Dyche built in the early part of this season or since the summer were far stronger than those that Lampard built on at the beginning of last season. There is one significant difference, and whilst Dyche does deserve to take credit for his patience in relation to Dominic Calvert-Lewin is a game changer in this side and in this squad. And I think that if Dominic Calvert-Lewin had been fit for 10 consecutive games under Lampard, and he shall not be named before him on this podcast, and then those 2 seasons may well have turned out a fair bit differently. But it's very clear, I think, that Everton have probably turned. They've probably turned things around. They've turned a page, I think. Dyche has been very, very a significant factor in that. And then I think that in terms of that dressing room, it's very, very clear that at the moment there is a strong clique. There's a clique, and they have a very strong relationship. And at the minute, they're pulling the club in a positive direction. And that's that Amadou Onana, Idrissa Gueye, Abdoulaye Doucouré, and albeit obviously bit part players on the pitch at the minute, but it's very clear from the scenes that we've seen there and previously that Arnaud Danjuma is also included in that, and I think Youssef Chermiti is as well. And at the minute, they seem to be at the heart of a lot of what's very good about this Everton side. And hopefully they'll take things forward. Obviously, Abdoulaye Doucouré signed a new contract, so we know that he's committed for the foreseeable future. And we've seen with Chermiti, increasing involvement in the first team. Obviously, played for the under-21s and got a goal at Mansfield recently. And the way in which Idrissa Gueye and Amadou Onana have both managed to kind of overcome a tricky period about 4 weeks ago where it looked like one of them was going to get dropped, or they're both getting dropped or in danger of running out of favour. They've both had Amadou Onana was dropped obviously for the Bournemouth game and then came back in at the very last minute because of Idrissa Gueye's injury. And Idrissa Gueye's been sidelined since then, but has come back and did what he did on Saturday as well. So it's clear that, to use one of the many Dychisms, that all the noses are pointing in the right direction, or at least a substantial amount of them are. And I think that it's clear that there is a stronger. I think Everton are in a much better position than they were this time last November. I don't think they were in as bad a position this November as it's perhaps we perhaps now look back on because we know what came after. But I think the difference is, because we know what came after and because we know the way in which this side is built on recent good results, that it's very clear that the foundations are a hell of a lot stronger. And obviously those at the club are responsible for that. Dyche, Falwell and others, they do deserve credit. And that is also a reason for hope going forward, that after this international break, it's not just going to be a momentum stunter. And there is reason to have belief going into that really tricky December.
These great points, obviously, all getting giddy after another away win, probably me in particular. But because I think I've seen the table from a year ago on Twitter. Don't quote me verbatim, but I'm pretty sure Everton had a similar amount of points now as they did back then. But the big difference is there's maybe 3 or 4 teams below us, and it was all very similar. And it does help that usually this season, doesn't it, Gav? Like, we're the ones pulling ourselves away from the bottom 3 at the moment, but it just feels different than the last couple of seasons, because it feels like there's going to be 3, maybe 4 teams who just aren't going to get 30 points plus at this rate.
Yeah, and that was always sort of the biggest influence in our destiny this year. It was not necessarily our performances, the performance of people below us, and that's what come to fruition, hasn't it? Really, I don't think we're looking at I'm going to really myself out on the limb here. I don't think we're going to be in a relegation battle this season. Which is, I think, that's just what I get the impression that's just what we wanted as a club. Just whatever you do, we just don't want to be at any point maybe could go down. And I think that's what are we 9 points ahead now, or something like that. Yeah, so we're now looking at mid-table mediocrity, aren't we? But that will be progress. That's a tremendous amount of progress. And as Joe said, although we got a similar point tally to last year, we still had the same points in the middle of January, didn't we? I know we had 6 weeks for November, but that was the problem, wasn't it? We come back after Christmas, then lost 4 or 5 on the spin, wasn't it? And we're out the FA Cup. So yeah, I mean, you can look back. I think the difference between now and November 2022 and November 2021, when Benitez was there, that was when it really started going on with Benitez, is the manager has got a settled team. Going back to what I said before, a settled team who all know the roles, who understand each other's roles, and know how they want Dyche to play. You've got Dyche knows how he wants to play, and there's a direction there, I think, that wasn't necessarily here 12 months ago and 24 months ago, and that's the big difference. So that's why I'm saying I think we expect us not to be involved in relegation scrap, and that I still expect us to pick up, points when we're expected to, at least over the rest of the season, which has not necessarily been the case in the last couple of campaigns, albeit with the caveat that is dependent on lots of stuff like keeping the players fit, or the judgments elsewhere of other have got to be taken into account here. Though I'm not saying that relegation is a possibility if we get a 12-point deduction. Actually, that could still be okay. So there's still a lot of another Dyson noise, isn't it, around there? But I'm pretty far more confident now than what I was 12 months ago and 2 years ago, because as you've seen, the manager's got a settled team, who know how to their roles and how to play.
Well, we kind of finish off with kind of like a roundup of the first third of the season, more or less. We're through now, aren't we, Chris? My concern at the start of the year that we were always below par because we were probably 7 and 9 points down from those first 3 home games. Do you think we're still below par? We still should be higher up, or do you think these away kind of wins have kind of got us to where we need to be in the table in terms of points?
We probably still are below par because, like you said, I remember I was saying at the time, I don't know if it was a bit of sunstroke from that all that sunshine out in Switzerland when I made my bold prediction of how many points Everton have after the first. No, but yeah, they had on paper, as always, the trouble, isn't it? A favourable set of fixtures, and the fact that they did poorly from those, albeit, as Dyche said and as we've said, played well but just couldn't convert the chances. That sort of had them on the back foot. So I would say they probably are a little bit below par, but you can see with the table, they're not cut adrift. They're still only like a couple of decent results away from breaking into proper mid-table, and they'll be much closer to that part of the table than the teams in the relegation zone. But I think the difference is we can see that progress since. Yes, it was a disappointing start. They didn't pick up as many points as they should have done and probably would have been expected to from those first lot of fixtures, but they've progressed since then and they've kicked on since then, both in terms of the results and the performances, albeit not a vintage performance on Saturday, but in many ways that makes it all that sweeter, the fact that they weren't great, but they still got the results. So yeah, that would be my verdict. Yeah, still probably a little bit below par, but because of the progress that's been made after a disappointing start, that's what gives you encouragement.
Joe, 12 games in?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably echo a lot of what Chris is saying. I think they're on about par right now. I think that, for all the joy and understandable joy and surprise you take from wins away at Palace and West Ham and Brentford, those are the 9 points that they should have got at home to Luton, Wolves and Fulham. But the difference is, and the reason I think that we can all take a bit of positivity from is the trajectory. They had the bad start and they've put it right, they've corrected it, and now that they're catching up on themselves. It's a far different story, and I think it'd be a far different momentum if they'd got the points early and then gone through, say for instance, this last set of fixtures between international breaks. They could very easily have lost every one of them. They could very easily have played very well and lost every one of them, and then you'd be in a different place psychologically, I think. So I think they're at par. I don't think they're ahead of themselves, but I think that the manner in which they've accumulated those points and the manner in which the performances have got better and better and the team's got stronger and stronger, because obviously there's a degree of change and flux at the beginning of the season because the transfer window was still open. I think it's almost par points tally, but an above par, almost a mentality, psychology now. I think the optimism is above where the points tally actually is, and I think that it's justified that that's the case. And the other bonus is obviously, as just alluded to, the fact that there are arguably 4 but certainly 3 teams that are making a very, very bad job at trying to stay in the Premier League this season. I think that's a huge bonus for Everton, and I think the reality is that whilst there might be a little bit of reluctance to say they're definitely not in a relegation fight this season, I think the reality is that it's only external factors that will drag them into that. I think that so long as Dyche and this Everton squad remain in control of their own destiny, they'll be fine, and it would probably take a combination of bad fortune to drag Everton into probably be a point deduction and an injury to a significant player or something along those lines, that even that would, and then even then you would still probably need at least one of those 3 clubs to really, really sort themselves out in a way in which they don't look capable of at this present moment in time before Everton got anywhere near trouble. And I think that's crucial, because I think that the aim of the club this season is to avoid trouble, and we all know that. We've spoken about it here before, but next summer there's going to be a huge amount of change in the squad, or there's an opportunity for a huge amount of change in the squad because of how many players are out of contract coming. Already a small squad, a fair few more that on the current trajectory would be leaving in the summer, and we don't know how things are going to go on with the takeover. But I think that the chances of Everton, wherever Everton are next summer, I don't think they'll have a huge amount of money to spend. So you look at how they can try and set themselves best up for next season, and the best advantage they can give themselves is time, is give Kevin Farwell and Sean Dyche 6, 7, 8 games before the end of this season, knowing that Everton are going to be in the Premier League, so they can start properly planning and not have to have contingency plans for Championship football like they have in the last season. I think that would be crucial. I think that has to be the main target, because I do think that what we're looking at in the Championship this season is probably 3 very strong sides coming up, probably Leicester, and then may well be, Leeds and Southampton may well be among them. Obviously, strong Premier League pedigree, remnants of a squad that was competitive with Everton's last season, and with the momentum of having come up and perhaps sorted some of their own issues out. I think it'll be more important than ever that Everton get a good head start on the transfer window, an opportunity to plan, not just because of their finances, because of who's coming up. Because I don't think that the Premier League will be anywhere near as weak next season as it is this season. But clearly, Everton are on a positive trajectory, and hopefully, whilst, as I say, they're on a par performance right now, hopefully over the next 6 months they can build on that and leapfrog over the likes of Forest and maybe a couple of other mid-table sides, so that they can really put some, get a head start and put some distance between themselves and a relegation fight next season, and then that will be sustainable progress and carry on building, and that's what we all want to see.
Just finish with you, Gav. I suppose we've got this 2-week break to bask in this brilliant run that the team have been on and enjoy it.
I've said that many times over the last few years.
Enjoy it, because when it returns, it's going to get busy very quickly, isn't it? I think we've all looked at December since the fixtures have come out, and it looks pretty daunting. And as Joe has alluded to there, without saying for certain, you'd imagine something will have come from the Premier League by the end of this run. I think we get like a 2-week break in January, don't we? I think the winter break's back. It feels like by the time we're kind of doing this kind of review podcast again at the end of another break, we'll really know where the club is on and off the field. It feels like we're going to be in for a couple of weeks break here, then a really busy...
Yeah, and the ownership issue is also massive here, isn't it? Because if that doesn't play out, right, then you may have a position where you might have to sell in January to raise money. So, yeah, that's got to play out. But, yeah, I think for me, going back on the points that are being raised, what I think is massive is that we're still in the Carabao Cup. I just think that gives everybody a lift round the club, doesn't it? Which we've not had a position, I think, probably since Martinez's last season, where we're still in there. And that gives people hope, doesn't it? Something to look forward to, increases morale, and we've had like a decent draw. And then, as Joe said, there's a chance that actually we might have another decent draw in the semi-final. Before you know it, you're at Wembley. And anything that can happen. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Where is Wembley?
Yeah.
So there you go.
As much as you can poo-poo the Carabao Cup, is one of the things people say is what it does. It gives people hope and keeps morale that you're still in there, and that's. I think that's made a massive difference to us, and it makes it look good, doesn't it? We've got 6 wins out of 9, 2 of them in the cup, but you know what I mean. But it's still a good start, isn't it? And I think between now and Christmas, okay, we've got a few. I know we got City, we got United, we got Spurs, but we got Forest, haven't we? We've got Burnley. We've got Wolves, I think, on. Yeah, so there's okay. I know we've got some difficult games. There's still 3 games there that actually you'd say, what you've seen so far this season, we can win all 3. Especially if you move them to London, I suppose, play in a neutral venue. So, and also, when what you're seeing, there's nothing to fear, like Man United in 2 weeks. That's a winnable game. So I know I've been saying for a while, haven't we? December, you want to look at a game. Some difficult ones there, which there are. There's some winnable ones there, and there's some where we might be able to get an unexpected result. But I think it comes back down to what we're saying, is everybody needs to be fit, don't they? I think if we lose 2 or 3 players for whatever reason, and there's a couple on 4 yellows as well, isn't there? That's going to stymie us a little bit. But confidence breeds confidence, doesn't it? And 6 wins out of 9, you'll be flying, wouldn't you, into the United game? I think the starting 11 and the coaching staff.
Definitely. And on that high point, I think it's a good time there to close. Thanks very much for listening. Those on trains, planes, cars, or at home, we do appreciate it. And hopefully Chris this week doesn't have to drag out that stat. Thanks very much for listening. Hope you enjoyed the podcast.